The shattering of glass echoed through the kitchen, followed by Harry's exasperated sigh. I closed my eyes, counting to 10 before turning to face the mess. It was the third plate this week. "Maggie, where's the dustpan?" Harry called out, not bothering to look for it himself. "Right where it always is, dear." "Under the sink," I replied, my voice strained with forced patience. As I watched him fumble with the broom, I couldn't help but wonder when my husband had become so helpless. "You know, if you'd just let me organize the cabinets my way, this wouldn't happen," he grumbled, sweeping the shards into a pile. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to remind him that his way involved shoving everything into random drawers. Instead, I focused on finishing the dishes, scrubbing perhaps a bit harder than necessary. "Oh, by the way," Harry said, dumping the broken plate into the trash, "Mom called earlier. She wants us over for dinner tomorrow night." My hands froze mid-scrub. "Tomorrow? But we have plans, remember? The Johnsons invited us for their barbecue." Harry shrugged, already heading for the living room. "We can do that another time. You know how Mom gets when we cancel." I did know. All too well. Ella, my mother-in-law, had a knack for guilt-tripping that would make a Catholic nun envious. But this was the third time this month we'd changed our plans to accommodate her whims. "Harry," I called out, following him, "don't you think it's time we set some boundaries with your mother?" He looked at me as if I'd suggested we move to Mars. "Boundaries? With Mom? Come on, Maggie. Don't be ridiculous. She's just lonely since Dad passed. It's been 5 years, Harry, and she has a busier social life than we do." Harry's face clouded over. "Look, I don't want to argue about this. We're going to Mom's tomorrow, end of discussion." I felt something snap inside me. "End of discussion? When did you become the dictator of this household? When did you become so selfish?" he shot back. "She's my mother, Maggie. She needs us." "And what about what I need?" I didn't realize I was shouting until I saw Harry flinch. "What about our marriage? When was the last time we did something just the two of us?" Harry's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his expression softening. "I've got to take this. It's work." As he walked away, already engrossed in his call, I sank onto the couch, feeling deflated. This wasn't the man I'd married 15 years ago. That Harry had been ambitious, attentive, and most importantly, my partner. This Harry, I wasn't sure who he was anymore. My own phone chimed with a text. It was from Lily, my sister-in-law. "SOS. Need to talk. Can you meet me at Joe's Diner in 20? I hesitated, glancing towards the study where I could hear Harry's muffled voice. Making a split-second decision, I grabbed my keys. "I'm going out," I called to Harry. No response. Of course, the drive to Joe's was a blur of streetlights and conflicting emotions. As I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted Lily already at our usual booth, her face pale and drawn. "Lily, what's wrong?" I slid in across from her, noting the untouched cup of coffee in front of her. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "It's Sam. And Ella. I overheard them talking. Maggie, I think they're plotting something against me." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Lily opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the diner's door chimed. We both looked up to see Harry walk in, his face a mask of fury as he spotted us. "Maggie? What the hell is going on here?" As Harry stormed towards our table, I realized that the quiet discontent in my marriage was about to erupt into something I wasn't sure I was prepared to face. Harry's thunderous expression sent a chill down my spine as he approached our booth. Lily shrank back, her eyes darting between us. "What's going on here?" Harry demanded, his voice low and dangerous. I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze. "I'm having coffee with my sister-in-law. Is that a crime now?" "Don't play games, Maggie. You snuck out without telling me." "I told you I was leaving. It's not my fault you were too busy with your work call to notice." Harry's jaw clenched. "We'll discuss this at home. Come on, let's go." I glanced at Lily, who looked on the verge of tears. "No, Harry. Lily needs me right now." "Oh, for God's sake," he muttered. "What's wrong now, Lily? Another imaginary slight from Mom." Lily flinched as if she'd been slapped. I felt my anger rising. "That's enough. Harry, go home. I'll be there when I'm done here." For a moment I thought he might argue further, but then his phone buzzed again, and he glanced at it, his expression changing. "Fine, don't be late. We have dinner at Mom's tomorrow, remember?" As Harry stormed out, I turned back to Lily. "I'm so sorry about that. Now, what were you saying about Ella and Sam?" Lily's hands trembled as she clutched her coffee cup. "I overheard them talking in the study last night. They were discussing ways to deal with me. Ella said I was becoming a problem, that I was turning Sam against her. I felt a surge of protective anger. What did Sam say? He agreed with her. Lily's voice broke. He said maybe it was time to consider other options, whatever that means. My mind raced. Have you confronted Sam about this? Lily shook her head. I'm scared, Maggie. You know what Ella's capable of. Remember what happened to Janet? I winced at the memory. Janet had been Sam's previous girlfriend before Lily. She'd stood up to Ella once too often and suddenly found herself the subject of vicious rumors that ruined her reputation in town. She'd moved away soon after. We need to do something, I said, reaching across the table to squeeze Lily's hand. This can't go on. Just then, the diner's door chimed again. We both looked up to see Ella herself sweep in, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer outfit a stark contrast to our disheveled appearances. Well, well, Ella said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. What a cozy little meeting. Planning another way to disappoint my boys, are we? I felt Lily stiffen beside me. Hello, Ella, I said, keeping my voice neutral. What brings you here? Ella's eyes narrowed. I was on my way home from Bridge Club when I saw your car, Maggie. Imagine my surprise when I realized you were here instead of at home with my Harry. You know how he hates to eat alone. Harry's a grown man, Ella. I'm sure he can manage dinner on his own for one night. Ella's smile turned predatory. Oh, I'm not worried about Harry. I'm more concerned about you, dear. It's not good for a wife to neglect her duties so frequently. I felt a retort building in my throat, but Lily spoke up first. We were just leaving, Ella. No need to worry about us. Ella's gaze swiveled to Lily, and I saw a flash of something cold in her eyes. Of course, dear. I'm sure Sam is wondering where you've run off to as well. You know how he worries. As Ella sauntered away to order her coffee, Lily and I exchanged glances. The weight of unspoken fears hung between us. We can't let her win, I whispered fiercely. Whatever she's planning, we need to be ready. Lily nodded, a spark of determination finally lighting her eyes. You're right. It's time we stopped being victims and started fighting back. As we left the diner, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were stepping onto a battlefield. But for the first time in years, I felt ready for the fight. The next morning I woke to an empty bed and the sound of hushed voices from downstairs. Creeping down the stairs, I recognized Harry's low murmur and Ella's sharp tones. My stomach clenched as I strained to hear their conversation. She's becoming a problem, Harry, Ella hissed. You need to get her under control. Mom, please. Maggie's just going through a phase. She'll come around. I bit back a bitter laugh. A phase? Is that what he thought this was? She's poisoning Lily against us, Ella continued. If we're not careful, they'll ruin everything we've worked for. My blood ran cold. What were they talking about? What had they worked for? Before I could hear Harry's response, the front door opened, and Sam's voice joined the mix. I retreated upstairs, my mind racing. Later that afternoon, I met Lily at the park, away from prying eyes and ears. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. Maggie, I can't take it anymore, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Last night, Sam, I felt a surge of protective anger. Did he hurt you? Lily shook her head. Not physically, but he told me I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. He said if I didn't stop causing trouble, he'd have to take action. That sounds like a threat, I said, my jaw clenching. It gets worse, Lily continued. I found these in his desk drawer. She handed me a stack of papers. As I flipped through them, my heart sank. Bank statements, property deeds, all in Sam's name alone. He's been hiding assets, I muttered. Lily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I think he's planning to leave me, Maggie, and if he does, I'll have nothing. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. We won't let that happen. We'll fight back together. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Harry. Where are you? Mom's waiting for us. I'd completely forgotten about the dinner at Ella's. I have to go, I told Lily, but this isn't over. We'll figure something out. When I arrived at Ella's house, the tension was palpable. Harry shot me a disapproving look as I slipped into my seat at the dining table. Nice of you to join us, dear, Ella said, her smile not reaching her eyes. We were just discussing the future of the family business. I blinked in surprise. I didn't know there was a family business. Sam chuckled. Oh, Maggie, always the last to know, aren't you? I felt a flash of anger, Maybe if someone bothered to tell me things, I wouldn't be. Now, Ella interjected smoothly. Let's not bicker. We have important matters to discuss. Harry, Sam, why don't you tell Maggie about our plans? As Harry and Sam launched into an explanation about some property development scheme, my mind whirled. This was what they'd been working on? And they'd kept me in the dark all this time? Of course, Ella continued, we'll need everyone's cooperation, including Lily's. I stiffened. What do you mean? Ella's smile turned predatory. Well, we'll need to use some of the properties in her name. For tax purposes, you understand. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The hidden assets, the whispered conversations, the threats against Lily. They were planning to use her, then discard her. No, I said, my voice ringing out in the sudden silence. Absolutely not. Harry's face darkened. Maggie, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I snapped. You're all planning to rob Lily blind. Well, it's not going to happen, not while I'm around. As I stood to leave, Ella's voice cut through the air like a whip. Sit down, Maggie. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I met her gaze, feeling a surge of defiance. No, Ella, you have no idea what you're dealing with. This ends now. As I stormed out of the house, I could feel the weight of their stares on my back. I knew I'd just declared war, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The battle was just beginning, and I was ready to fight. The days following my confrontation at Ella's house were a blur of tense silences and heated arguments. Harry barely spoke to me, spending most of his time on hushed phone calls or locked away in his study. I knew I was walking a dangerous line, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at stake. One evening, as I was sorting through old papers in our bedroom, I stumbled upon a folder I'd never seen before. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing a stack of legal documents. As I scanned the pages, my blood ran cold. Harry! I shouted, storming downstairs with the folder clutched to my chest. What the hell is this? He looked up from his laptop, his face paling as he saw what I was holding. Maggie, I can explain. Explain? I threw the papers onto the coffee table. Explain how you've been secretly transferring our assets into accounts I can't access. Explain how you've been funneling money into this so-called family business without my knowledge or consent. Harry stood, his hands raised in a placating gesture. It's not what you think. We're just protecting our interests. Our interests? I laughed bitterly. Or your mother's. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Help. Sam's gone crazy. He's threatening to take everything. My heart raced. I have to go, I told Harry, already grabbing my keys. Where are you going? He demanded, following me to the door. I whirled to face him. To help your brother's wife, since apparently none of you care about her well-being. I arrived at Lily's house to find her sitting on the front steps, her face buried in her hands. When she looked up, I saw a bruise forming on her cheek. Oh, Lily, I breathed, pulling her into a hug. What happened? Through her tears, she told me how Sam had come home in a rage, accusing her of conspiring against the family. When she'd confronted him about the hidden assets, he'd lost control. He said if I didn't sign over everything to him, he'd make sure I ended up with nothing, she sobbed. Maggie, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I held her tightly, my mind racing. We need to get you out of here. Pack a bag. You're coming with me. As Lily gathered her things, I made a series of phone calls. First to a lawyer friend who owed me a favor, then to a women's shelter I'd volunteered at years ago. Finally, to my sister across state lines. By the time Sam's car pulled into the driveway, we were ready to leave. He stumbled out, his face contorted with anger when he saw us. Where do you think you're going? He slurred, blocking our path to my car. I stepped in front of Lily, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. Move, Sam. You don't want to do anything you'll regret. He lunged forward, but I was ready. The self-defense classes I'd taken after college finally paid off as I sidestepped his clumsy attack, using his momentum to send him sprawling. Let's go, I told Lily, ushering her into the car. As we drove away, I could see Sam shouting and gesticulating in the rearview mirror. My phone buzzed incessantly. Harry, no doubt, having been alerted by his brother. What now? Lily asked, her voice small and scared. I took a deep breath, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. Now we fight back. No more playing nice, no more being the obedient wives they expect us to be. It's time to show Ella and her boys exactly what we're capable of. As we crossed the city limits, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. I knew that by driving away I was leaving behind the life I'd known for the past 15 years. But looking at Lily's determined face beside me, I also knew I was driving towards something far more important: freedom, justice, and the chance to reclaim our lives. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the war had begun, and we were ready for battle. The safe house my sister had arranged for us was small but secure. As days turned into weeks, Lily and I settled into a routine, strategizing our next moves and supporting each other through the emotional turmoil. We'd both filed for divorce, and the legal battle was just beginning. One afternoon, as we pored over financial documents, my phone rang. It was Harry. "Maggie, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Come home, we can work this out." I felt a pang in my chest, but steeled myself. "There's nothing to work out, Harry. You made your choice." "Mom's sick," he blurted out. She needs us, all of us." I froze, my mind racing. Was this another manipulation, or was Ella truly ill? Before I could respond, I heard Ella's voice in the background. "Tell her I need one of my daughters-in-law to move in and take care of me. It's the least they can do after tearing this family apart." My blood boiled. Even now, Ella was trying to control us. "Put her on the phone," I demanded. "Maggie, dear," Ella's saccharine voice oozed through the speaker. "I hope you've come to your senses. This little rebellion of yours has gone on long enough." "Rebellion?" I scoffed. "Is that what you call standing up for ourselves?" "Don't be dramatic," Ella chided. "Now I expect either you or Lily to be here by tomorrow. I need round-the-clock care, and who better than family?" I glanced at Lily, who was shaking her head vehemently. "That's not going to happen, Ella," I said firmly. "Oh." Her tone turned icy. "Well, perhaps you should consider the consequences of your refusal. I'd hate for certain information to come to light." My heart raced. "What are you talking about?" "Let's just say I know things about both you and Lily that you'd rather keep private. Your choice, dear." The line went dead, leaving me stunned. "What is it?" Lily asked, her face pale. "What did she say?" I relayed the conversation, watching Lily's expression shift from fear to anger. "She's bluffing," Lily insisted. "She can't know anything that bad." But doubt gnawed at me. What if Ella did have something on us? Could we risk calling her bluff? Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number containing a video file. With trembling fingers, I pressed play. The grainy footage showed me, years ago, in a heated argument with my former boss. I watched horror as my past self shoved him, causing him to stumble back against his desk. "Oh, God," I whispered. "I'd forgotten about that." Lily peered at the screen. "What is it?" "It was right before I quit my last job," I explained. He'd been harassing me for months. That day, he tried to... I just snapped. I never reported it because I was afraid no one would believe me. Another text came through. "Imagine if this got out. Assault charges could complicate your divorce, couldn't they?" Lily's phone chimed next. She gasped as she read the message. "They know about the money I've been sending my sister," she said, her voice shaking. "The money from the joint account with Sam. They're threatening to accuse me of embezzlement." We sat in stunned silence, the weight of Ella's threats hanging over us. "What do we do now?" Lily asked, her voice small. I closed my eyes, feeling the walls closing in. We'd come so far, fought so hard. Could we really let Ella win now? But as I looked at Lily, saw the fear and determination in her eyes, I knew we couldn't back down. We'd weathered too much to give up now. "We fight," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "We call her bluff, and we fight back harder than ever. No more running, no more hiding. It's time to take the battle to them." Lily nodded, a spark of hope igniting in her eyes. "Together?" I reached out and squeezed her hand. "Together. They have no idea what we're capable of." As we began to formulate our plan, I felt a surge of resolve. Ella thought she had the upper hand, but she'd underestimated us for the last time. The real war was just beginning, and we were ready to win. The morning after Ella's threats, I woke to find Lily pacing our small living room, her face ashen. "Maggie," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I need to tell you something I've been hiding." My heart raced as I sat up, bracing myself for whatever bombshell she was about to drop. "What is it, Lily?" She collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. "Sam's been having an affair," she choked out, "for years. And Ella's been covering for him." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How long have you known? I suspected for a while, but I found proof last month, Lily confessed. Emails, hotel receipts. And then I overheard Ella talking to Sam about keeping it quiet. She said it was for the good of the family. Rage boiled inside me. That manipulative witch, I seethed. And Sam? How could he do this to you? Lily's sobs intensified. There's more, she whispered. The woman he's been seeing, she's pregnant. The room spun around me as the full weight of Lily's revelation sank in. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was about a child, an innocent life caught in the crossfire of our family's dysfunction. We need to confront them, I said, my voice hard with determination. All of them. No more hiding, no more secrets. Lily nodded, wiping her eyes. But how? They'll just deny everything. A plan began to form in my mind. We gather evidence, everything we can find, and then we hit them where it hurts, their precious family business. We spent the next few days in a frenzy of activity. I called in favors from old colleagues, dug through financial records, and pieced together a damning picture of fraud and deceit that went far beyond Sam's affair. As we prepared to confront our husbands and Ella, my phone buzzed with a text from Harry. We need to talk. Meet me at the park in an hour. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I arrived, Harry was pacing nervously by the fountain. Maggie, he said, his voice strained. I know things have been bad between us, but I need you to come home. Mom's condition is getting worse, and the business... We're in trouble. Big trouble. I steeled myself against the flicker of sympathy I felt. What kind of trouble, Harry? He ran a hand through his hair. Financial irregularities. The auditors are asking questions. If we don't sort this out, we could lose everything. For a moment, I was tempted to tell him everything I knew, to offer help. But then I remembered Lily's tears, Ella's threats, the years of manipulation. I'm sorry, Harry, I said, my voice steady, but I can't help you, not anymore. His face darkened. You don't understand. If this gets out, it won't just be us who suffer. Think about the employees, their families. Don't you dare try to guilt me, I snapped. You made your choices. Now you have to live with the consequences. As I turned to leave, Harry grabbed my arm. Maggie, please. I love you. I wrenched my arm free, tears stinging my eyes. If you loved me, you wouldn't have let your mother control our lives. You wouldn't have lied to me for years. What are you talking about? Harry's face paled. I know everything, Harry. About the business, about Sam's affair. And I know you've been hiding things from me, too. Harry's expression shifted from confusion to fear. Maggie, whatever you think you know. Save it, I cut him off. Lily and I are done being your family's doormats. We're taking control of our lives, and if that means bringing down this house of cards you've built, so be it. As I walked away, leaving Harry stunned and silent, my phone buzzed again. It was Lily. Maggie, she gasped, her voice thick with tears. I just got a call from the hospital. It's Ella. She's had a heart attack. I froze, the weight of everything crashing down on me. In that moment, I realized we'd reached the point of no return. Whatever happened next would change our lives forever. I'm on my way, I told Lily, my voice steadier than I felt. It's time to end this, once and for all. The hospital corridor seemed endless as Lily and I rushed towards Ella's room. My mind raced with conflicting emotions. Concern for a woman I'd once considered family, anger at her manipulations, and fear of what awaited us. As we rounded the corner, we saw Harry and Sam huddled outside Ella's room, their faces drawn with worry. They looked up as we approached, surprise and relief flickering across their features. Maggie, Lily, Harry said, his voice hoarse. You came. Before I could respond, a nurse emerged from Ella's room. She's asking for you all, she said softly. We filed into the room, the tension palpable. Ella lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. But as her eyes met mine, I saw a flash of the old steel. Well, she rasped, I suppose it took me nearly dying to bring this family back together. I felt Lily stiffen beside me. We're here out of concern, Ella, I said carefully. But don't think for a moment that this changes anything. Ella's lips curved into a weak smile. Always the fighter, aren't you, Maggie? But there are things you don't know. Things that... Suddenly, Lily stepped forward, her face flushed. No more secrets, she said, her voice trembling. No more lies. I know about Sam's affair, Ella. I know you've been covering for him. The room fell silent. Sam's face drained of color while Harry looked between us in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Harry demanded. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "It's not just Sam, Harry. We know about the financial irregularities in the business. We know about the fraud." Harry's eyes widened in shock. "How did you?" "That's enough." Ella's voice cracked like a whip, startling us all. She struggled to sit up, her eyes blazing. "You ungrateful girls have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family." "Sacrificed?" I scoffed. "You've manipulated and lied to us for years." As the accusations flew, the room descended into chaos. Sam and Harry tried to defend themselves, while Ella alternated between pleas for understanding and threats. In the midst of the turmoil, Lily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then gasped. "Maggie," she whispered, showing me the screen. It was an email from our lawyer. Attached were documents proving not only Sam's infidelity, but also Harry's. My world tilted on its axis as I scanned the evidence. Hotel receipts, intimate messages, even photos. I felt as if I'd been plunged into icy water. All this time, while I'd been fighting to save my marriage, Harry had been betraying me too. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice breaking as I turned to Harry. His face crumpled. "Maggie, I can explain, but I was beyond explanations. Years of pent-up anger, hurt, and betrayal surged through me. "No," I said, my voice gaining strength. "No more explanations. No more chances. Lily and I are done." Ella struggled to sit up, her face contorted with rage. "You can't just walk away. Think of the scandal, the shame." "The only shame here is what you've done to this family," Lily said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. I turned to Lily, seeing my own pain and determination reflected in her face. "We're leaving," I said, "for good this time." As we walked towards the door, Sam called out, "You'll never survive without us. You have nothing." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "We have each other," I said, not bothering to look back. "And that's more than enough." With that, Lily and I stepped out of the room, leaving behind the shattered remains of our old lives. As the door closed on the sounds of Ella's angry shouts and our husband's pleas, I felt a strange mix of grief and liberation. "What now?" Lily asked, her voice small but determined. I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from our shared resolve. "Now, we start over, on our own terms." As we walked out of the hospital into the bright sunlight, I knew the hardest part of our journey was still ahead, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Whatever challenges awaited us, Lily and I would face them together, stronger than ever. 2 weeks after our hospital confrontation, Lily and I stood outside Ella's sprawling mansion, our hearts pounding. We'd received a summons, a final attempt, no doubt, to manipulate us back into the fold. But this time we were ready. "Are you sure about this?" Lily whispered, her hand trembling in mine. I squeezed her fingers reassuringly. "Absolutely. It's time to end this once and for all." As we entered, the tension in the air was palpable. Harry, Sam, and Ella sat in the living room, their faces a mix of anger, fear, and desperation. Ella, looking frail but determined, spoke first. "Girls, I'm glad you've come to your senses. Now let's discuss how we can move past this unpleasantness." I felt a surge of anger at her dismissive tone. "There's nothing to discuss, Ella. We're here to tell you that we're filing for divorce." The room erupted into chaos. Sam leapt to his feet, his face red with rage. "You can't do this. Think of the scandal, the shame." Harry, pale and shaken, pleaded. "Maggie, please. We can work this out. I'll do anything." But it was Ella's reaction that surprised me most. She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that sent chills down my spine. "You foolish girls," she spat. "You think you can just walk away? I built this family, this empire. I won't let you destroy it." Lily stepped forward, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "You're the one who destroyed it, Ella. With your lies, your manipulations. We're just finally breaking free." As accusations flew and tempers flared, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I realized that this moment, this confrontation, was what we'd been building towards for years. "Enough," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "We're not here to argue. We're here to tell you that it's over. We have evidence of your infidelities, your financial fraud. If you try to fight us on this, we'll take it all public." The color drained from their faces as the full impact of our words sank in. Harry slumped in his chair, defeated. Sam paced like a caged animal. But Ella's eyes blazed with a fury I'd never seen before. "You ungrateful little—" she began, rising from her chair. But before she could finish, Lily interrupted, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. No, Ella, we're not ungrateful. We're survivors. And we're done letting you control our lives. In that moment, looking at Lily's determined face, I felt a surge of pride and love for my sister-in-law. We'd been through hell together, and we'd come out stronger. This is your last chance, I said, addressing all three of them. Accept the divorce terms we've proposed, or we'll see you in court. And trust me, you don't want that. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Harry spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from us? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. We want our freedom, a fair division of assets, and your word that you'll never try to contact us again. Sam opened his mouth to argue, but Ella held up a hand, silencing him. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the formidable woman she once was, the woman who had held this family in her iron grip for so long. You've won, she said, her voice laced with bitterness. Take what you want and go. As Lily and I turned to leave, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Years of resentment, fear, and anger began to melt away, replaced by a sense of possibility. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Lily turned to me, tears glistening in her eyes. We did it, she whispered. We're free. I pulled her into a tight hug, feeling my own eyes well up. Yes, we are, and we did it together. As we walked away from the house that had been our prison for so long, I felt a sense of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time it was ours to choose. So, Lily said, a small smile playing on her lips. What now? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Now we live, Lily. On our own terms, by our own rules, the world is waiting for us. Hand in hand, we walked towards our new future, leaving behind the shadows of our past. We had faced our demons, confronted our fears, and emerged victorious. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we could face them, together, as sisters, as survivors, as women who had reclaimed their power and their lives. The end was just the beginning, and I couldn't wait to see what came next.
Unable to sleep, I decided to head downstairs for a glass of water. It was midnight, and I carefully navigated the darkened house, trying not to make a sound. To my surprise, the lights were already on in the living room. As I approached, I overheard my husband, son, and daughter-in-law whispering. Did you see how desperate she was, trying to win us over? One of them said, followed by a chuckle. Pathetic, another added. The look on her face when she saw the leftovers in the trash was priceless. The food wasn't even that good, but when she asked if we liked it, I almost lost it. They continued, laughing at my expense and calling me useless. I wished it were just a bad dream, but I knew things had gone too far for that. I had reached my limit. Ever since my son and his wife moved into the new house we built a few months ago, I've been continuously ignored. The three of them would look at me with eerie smirks. Lately, I had moved past anger and sadness. I felt nothing anymore. It didn't take long to decide to leave the house. I quietly returned to my room and started searching for a temporary apartment. The next night after work, I packed the essentials into a suitcase. Once I left for the temporary apartment, I received calls from my husband, my son, and his wife that same night. Mom, come back right now. I was planning to treat you to dinner tonight. Please come back. Hey, where are you? Stop being stubborn and come home now. They all kept chanting, come back, in unison. As I thought back on everything that had happened, I gave my response. My name is Camilla. While working full-time, I also manage the household. My husband Oliver works as well, and it's a daily routine for him to complain about his subordinates at the breakfast table. Young subordinates these days don't even want to answer the phone. It's ridiculous. It's different now. Now everything can be done through social media. They lack a sense of responsibility as professionals. When I was younger, and from there, his endless stories about the past would begin. I would always listen with a sense of resignation. To put it bluntly, my husband is not someone with modern views. He casually says things like, men should work outside and women should focus on housework and childcare, or women should serve men. He can't stand not having control at home and likes to act like the Lord and Master. When our children got married and moved out, and I decided to become a working wife, he didn't like the idea, but I managed to convince him to let me work. By the way, about the new house we were planning to build. I gave a half-hearted response to his words, which he started with excitement. Despite being in his 50s, he had decided we should buy a new house. He said it would be more comfortable to spend our retirement in a new house rather than in our old, outdated one. But isn't our current house good enough? We could just remodel it instead of rebuilding. No, it has to be a new house, he insisted stubbornly. Refusing to change his mind, Oliver pushed through with his plan, and we ended up hiring a home builder. When it's finished, let's invite our son and his wife for a party. They'll love it, he exclaimed, excitedly planning the menu for the party. I knew he'd leave all the arrangements and serving to me while he just decided on the menu. I sighed quietly to myself. Soon, the new house was completed, and my husband and I moved in immediately. The unique scent of new wood filled the space with a gentle aroma. Aren't you glad we built it? He puffed out his chest proudly. Even though it felt a bit too spacious for just the two of us in a 2-story house. I couldn't help but feel a bit happy at that moment. A month later, Oliver and I invited our son and his wife for a housewarming party to celebrate the new house. Our son, Mason, and his wife, Daisy, entered with wide-eyed amazement. Currently living in an apartment, they couldn't stop expressing their admiration. It's so spacious. What a beautiful house. It's wonderful, they exclaimed. Encouraged by their words, my husband casually suggested, if you want, you can live with us. We have extra rooms. Come on, they can't possibly want to live with us. Stop joking, I said, laughing it off. The party ended on a cheerful note. Little did I expect that they would take his words seriously and move in. A few days after the party, my son and his wife arrived with large luggage. What's with all the stuff? I asked, bewildered. Mason tilted his head. We're moving in. Daisy added, your husband said it was okay. They walked in as if it was their home. When I asked about their apartment, they said they had canceled the lease, effective at the end of the month. This is too sudden, I said, trying to gently oppose the idea, hoping they would choose to be independent. But they wouldn't listen and instead won Oliver over. Oliver said, what's the difference if 1 or 2 more people live here? It's not about the number of people. And besides, if they've canceled their lease, they have nowhere to go. It's cruel, I replied, even though it was their responsibility. But my husband was adamant, and thus they moved in with us, almost uninvited. After a while, a moving truck arrived in front of the house, and some well-built movers began diligently unloading boxes. They finally left with a cheerful thank you, leaving my son and his wife's belongings scattered all over the new house. However, instead of tidying up, the two of them relaxed in the living room, lazily playing with their smartphones. These are your things. Please put them away, I said, as there was no room to walk. Mason replied, we're tired, so you should do it, Mom. Most of the moving had been done by the movers, and they had done nothing. My husband saw this and said nothing, merely glancing at the pile of boxes. Oliver, say something to them, I urged. Oliver said, don't be so rigid, Camilla. You should do it for them. We're family. He then returned to his smartphone. I thought, why me asterisk, but I took a deep breath to calm myself. There must be fragile and important items among their belongings. Even though we're family, I felt uncomfortable handling their stuff. Daisy, could you at least help me? I asked. All 6 eyes turned to me, and they began to speak, one after another, accusing me of bullying, being unwelcoming, and being a terrible mother-in-law. I felt utterly bewildered, treated as if I were the unreasonable one. The next morning, still feeling exhausted, I went down to the living room. My husband, my son, and his wife were already awake, sipping coffee. As I stared at them absently, Mason muttered, "Thanks for yesterday." His words felt insincere, and I responded curtly. Mason continued, "As a thank you, we'll treat you to dinner." I thought I had misheard him, but apparently I hadn't. Mason added, "Daisy and I will go grocery shopping today." Daisy nodded from a distance. "Is that so? Well, I'll leave it to you today," I said. Daisy then added, "We just moved and don't have much money." Mason chimed in, "Yeah, so we actually need to borrow your card." I blinked in surprise. Were they planning to use my card for shopping and then treat me to dinner with my own money? Something felt off about this, but they asked for the credit card with such confidence. Should I give it to them? I glanced at my husband, who was sipping his coffee, showing no interest. Despite my hesitation, I decided to lend them the card, hoping to build a good relationship with them. Mason and Daisy were as happy as children given pocket money. Use it responsibly. I warned, though inwardly I felt a bit excited myself. I thought this dinner could be an opportunity to get closer to them. You can use anything from the kitchen and the dishes, too. The spices are in this cabinet. I showed Daisy the locations, and she nodded with a low yes. Later that evening, I came home from work, hoping that they would have dinner ready. How wonderful that would have been. In reality, instead, I found the house dark and silent. I turned on the lights and looked around, but there was no sign of my son and his wife. On the living room table, there were store-bought side dishes from the nearby supermarket and a note placed in the center. It read simply, "We're going out to eat." As I stood there in shock, Oliver came home and looked around the living room table. Seeing the store-bought dishes, he looked displeased. Oliver snapped, "You're the housewife. Don't slack off. It's not me." Daisy and Mason said they'd handle dinner tonight. I replied, feeling frustrated. Despite their promise to prepare dinner, I was left with a feeling of unease, even after the meal. The next morning, I was determined to confront my son and his wife about the previous night. "Good morning." I greeted them, but my words seemed to vanish into thin air. No one responded. Until yesterday, they had at least acknowledged me. Feeling something was wrong, I made breakfast for the 4 of us and set it on the table, yet no one touched the food. They just sipped their coffee in the living room. Determined, I tried again to engage them. "Good morning," I said louder, but Oliver, my son, and his wife remained silent. This pattern continued the next day and the day after that, with all 3 of them ignoring me no matter what I did. A month passed, and nothing changed. Despite making meals, I was met with silence and felt increasingly empty. I started to wonder if I was the problem and tried to be patient, hoping they would eventually open up. I made Oliver's favorite dishes, talked to Mason about his childhood, and invited Daisy to go shopping. Yet, I was continually ignored, and time just kept passing. Another week went by, and not only was the food I made left untouched, but it was also thrown into the trash. "Mason, did you always dislike this?" I asked, my voice trembling. That day I had made fried chicken, shredded cabbage, croquettes, and sunny-side-up eggs. Both the fried chicken and croquettes were homemade, his favorites since he was a child. Watching him silently throw the food into the trash beside the sink filled me with a strange fear. Shortly after that, my husband handed me a piece of paper. Actually, it would be more accurate to say he threw it at me just before I entered the living room. It was neatly folded into a paper airplane and aimed right at me. Ouch! What is this? I picked up the paper that had hit my forehead and fluttered to the ground. It looked like some kind of document. As I unfolded it, I realized it was a divorce paper. It had Oliver's signature and seal, leaving only my section blank. Shocked, I glanced towards where the plane had come from and saw my husband smirking at me. My son and his wife were also snickering beside him. A divorce paper, of all things. Was he implying he wanted a divorce? I was overwhelmed and fled the living room, locking myself in my room in shock. I paced around my room, my mind racing. Ignoring me was one thing, but this harassment was beyond belief. The word divorce echoed in my head, filling me with turmoil. The silent treatment and the paper airplane divorce papers continued for about 3 months. What I thought would be a short-lived prank showed no sign of stopping. The three of them would look at me with eerie grins. At this point, I felt no emotions anymore. The anger and sadness had given way to complete disbelief. A voice in my head whispered, maybe I should get a divorce asterisk. Around this time, I started keeping a journal to organize my thoughts. I opened a notebook and began scribbling furiously with a pen I found in the drawer. I had recently discovered that Mason and Daisy were unemployed. I overheard them talking with Oliver about it while they ignored me. I didn't know whether it was before or after they moved in, but it seemed they had no income. They laughed derisively, saying they had no intention of working or helping around the house. So what were they doing during the day while I was out? Apparently, they were simply using my credit card to entertain themselves. The card I lent them to buy groceries for dinner had never been returned. The statements from the credit card company were filled with charges from expensive restaurants and luxury brand items. They had been dining out frequently, using my card. Oliver, it seemed, said nothing about this. Did he think money grew on trees? I felt a surge of frustration after finishing my writing. I closed the notebook and shut my eyes. What exactly do these three want from me? One night, I woke up unexpectedly. Even though I knew sleeplessness would affect my work the next day, I couldn't fall back asleep. It was midnight, and I decided to go downstairs to get some water. As I carefully made my way to the living room, trying not to make any noise, I noticed something surprising. The lights were on. The light leaking through the door wasn't the only thing. I also heard hushed voices. Oliver said, "Did you see how desperate she was, trying to please us? It's just pathetic." Daisy replied, "Yeah, her face when she saw the leftovers in the trash was hilarious." Mason added, "The fried chicken and croquettes weren't even that good." When she asked, "Do you not like it?" I almost burst out laughing. Oliver continued, "Honestly, her cooking is below average. Good job, Mason." Daisy agreed, "And I really wish she'd stop inviting me to go shopping with her." They insulted and laughed at me, calling me useless. I wished it were just a bad dream, but it was all too real. I had reached my limit. Once I decided to leave, I acted quickly. I quietly returned to my room and started looking for a temporary apartment. The next evening after work, I packed the essentials into a suitcase. A few days later, I signed the lease for a temporary apartment, got the keys, and headed to the place. That morning, all three of them had gone out, so the house was empty. I called the credit card company and canceled my card, stopping it from being used any further. Leaving the newly built house behind, I arrived at my temporary home and felt an unexpected sense of relief. No more enduring their treatment. My shoulders relaxed, and I collapsed onto the floor. That night, my phone buzzed. Seeing it was a call from my son, I answered. "Hello." "Mom, come back right now. The card isn't working." I canceled the card. "What? Why did you do that? We were eating sushi, and now what are we supposed to do?" Asterisk, so they had sushi today. How nice for them. Asterisk, I thought to myself. Figure it out yourself. I snapped at my son before hanging up the call. It was convenient for him to want to talk only when he needed something. Next, Daisy called. Just as I was about to make some instant noodles, my phone rang again. "Hello." "Camilla, it's me. Mason told me you canceled the card. Why did you do that?" She sobbed quietly on the other end. "I was going to treat you to dinner tonight. Please come back." Her insincere words made me decide to speak my mind. "Daisy, I'd be happier if you treated me with money you earned yourself." "What are you saying?" "I don't work. That's cruel," she stammered. "Do you think I don't know?" I responded, my words clearly unsettling her as she kept repeating, well, I mean." "Get your act together," I retorted before hanging up. She was likely puzzled by my words, wondering what I meant. Telling someone to get your act together is a way of telling them to wake up and be responsible. I wanted her to stop relying on my card and get a job, even if it was just part-time, to support herself. Then Oliver called. I had just poured hot water into my noodles and waited the 3 minutes. "Where are you? Stop being stubborn and come home," he demanded, sounding frantic. "Are you also having trouble because the card isn't working?" I asked. He paused for a moment, then asked how I knew. When I told him the others had called, he responded in agreement. I continued, "Sorry, but I'm divorcing you." "What? You can't just decide that on your own. Where are you?" he demanded. "I'm not telling you." "Enjoy your time with Mason and Daisy." "I can't do that. They're just money leeches." The fact that he knew this while allowing them to freely use my card left me speechless. They only... Isn't that something a real estate agent can just handle quickly?" he asked. He was clearly clueless. Since he had always left contracts and other paperwork to me, he had no idea how it worked. If he wanted, he could try going to a real estate agent, but they would just laugh at him. "Speaking of real estate," I said, pausing, "I've already put the land and house up for sale. So, once it's sold, you'll need to move out." While preparing for temporary housing, I decided to put the land and house up for sale. The real estate agent was delighted, noting that the good location would ensure a quick sale. Indeed, there had already been a lot of interest since it was listed. When I told my husband this, he seemed too stunned to respond, as if his earlier bravado had completely vanished. It was truly comical. "And by the way, I've already submitted the divorce papers you threw at me to the city office, so we're no longer married. Don't contact me anymore." Oliver responded, "What? Wait, what are you talking about? Hold on. Hey!" It seemed as if a switch had flipped in him, and he suddenly panicked, but it was too late. "We're divorced. Goodbye, Oliver," I said firmly. Frantically, he yelled, "No." "Before that, what did you say? Are you listening?" I hung up before he could finish. The cup of noodles I had set aside had become soggy and was spilling out of the cup slightly, but I picked it up gently. I was finally free from them. This thought made even the soggy noodles taste good. About a week after listing the house, I received a call saying they had found a buyer. Despite the new construction, which fetched a significant price, the buyer was willing to pay in full upfront. I agreed immediately and arranged to finalize the sale in the following days. Before finalizing the sale, I decided to inspect the property one last time with the real estate agent. To my dismay, the three of them were still living there. The place was a mess, with garbage scattered around, and the kitchen covered in burn marks from failed cooking attempts. The bathroom was dusty and had an unpleasant smell. It was in no condition to be handed over to a new owner, so we had no choice but to evict them and arrange for a thorough cleaning. In disbelief, I explained the situation to the real estate agent. Despite their protests, we forced them to leave. Although they agreed to vacate immediately, it was clear that they were not sincere. After we left, the three of them called incessantly, with the phone ringing every few minutes. Their persistence was infuriating. I blocked their phone numbers and social media accounts. They then came to my workplace, where I formally cut ties with them. Oliver was indifferent, but Mason and Daisy seemed genuinely shocked. Mason said, "Cutting ties? There was no need to go that far." Daisy added, "It's awful, Camilla." Mason then asked, "But I'm different, right?" "I'm your son." "Oh, and by the way, could you make some more fried chicken and croquettes? I love those." At that moment, I remembered him throwing my cooking in the trash. I wondered if he had really felt that way back then. "Don't say things that suit your convenience," I replied firmly and turned my back on them. Since then, I haven't seen my son, his wife, or my husband. I have no idea where they moved. Having left the weekly apartment, I now live in a small apartment for single occupancy. I continue to work but take great pleasure in the freedom of living alone. With the extra time, I can study for qualifications or start new hobbies. I want to enjoy this leisurely time as much as possible. Even though it's not a new house, this small room is still my castle. I'm excited to redecorate, try out some dried flowers, and cook just for myself. With these thoughts in mind, I poured hot water slowly into my cup of noodles.
I was folding laundry in the quiet of our suburban home when the phone rang. It was an ordinary Thursday, but that phone call was about to shatter the mundanity of my life. I wiped my hands on my apron as I answered. "Hey, Mom, it's Lucas," came the voice of my son, who had ventured out into the world, leaving the nest for college 2 years ago. "Lucas, darling, is everything okay?" I asked, a smile naturally forming on my lips at the sound of his voice. There was a pause, a hesitation I wasn't used to with Lucas. "Mom, I need to ask you something. Where's Dad these days?" I frowned slightly, puzzled. "Your father?" "He's been really busy with work. He's staying at the company's apartment for a while." "Why do you ask?" Another pause, longer this time. Lucas's voice, when it came, was laden with uncertainty. "Mom, I think Dad's company doesn't have any company apartments." My heart skipped a beat. "How do you know that?" "Well, I was at this job fair, and I overheard some people talking about Dad's company. They said there aren't any company apartments. Mom, is it possible that Dad is lying to us?" The room suddenly felt colder, the walls closing in. I struggled to maintain my composure. "Lucas, are you sure? Maybe you misunderstood." "No, Mom, I'm sure, and I think Dad is seeing someone else." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Lucas, that's a serious accusation. Are you sure you're not mistaken?" "I wish I were, Mom. I saw Dad with this woman younger, maybe in her 20s. They seemed close. Too close." My hands trembled, the phone almost slipping from my grasp. The man I had spent 20 years of my life with, could he really betray us like this? "Mom, are you there?" Lucas's voice was laced with concern. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. Yes, I'm here. Lucas, thank you for telling me. I need some time to think about this. We'll figure this out, Mom. I'm here for you, he said firmly. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, the unfinished laundry forgotten. My mind raced with questions and fears. Had I been so blind? Was the love and trust I invested in my marriage a mere facade? The thought of Mark with another woman, especially someone Lucas's age, churned my stomach. I had to find out the truth. But how? The idea of confronting Mark terrified me. Yet the thought of living in ignorance was even worse. I needed answers, and I was determined to get them, no matter how painful they might be. As the sun set outside, casting long shadows across the room, I realized that my once peaceful life was now on the brink of a storm, and I had to brace myself for whatever was coming. Saturday morning dawned with a heaviness that seemed to mirror my mood. Mark was due to visit this weekend, but the thought no longer brought me joy. The words of my son, Lucas, echoed in my mind, tainting every memory I had of Mark. As I prepared breakfast, the doorbell rang. It was my in-laws, George and Helen, arriving for their weekly visit. Despite the turmoil within, I greeted them with a forced smile. "Emma, dear, you look a bit off. Is everything all right?" Helen asked, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Just a headache," I lied, unwilling to burden them with my suspicions. We sat around the breakfast table, chatting about mundane things. But my heart wasn't in it. My gaze kept drifting to Mark's empty chair, a stark reminder of the growing distance between us. When the topic turned to Mark, Helen's tone was warm. "He's been working so hard lately. You must be proud of him, getting that big project at the office." I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, very proud." George, always the jovial one, chimed in. "Remember how he used to say he'd be a big shot one day? Looks like he was right." Their pride in their son was palpable, and it twisted the knife in my heart further. How could I shatter this image they had of Mark? The loving son, the dedicated husband. But beneath that facade lay a different truth, one that Lucas had unwittingly uncovered. As they continued to praise Mark, a part of me wanted to scream, to tell them that their perfect son was a liar, a cheat. But I couldn't, not without proof. The rest of their visit passed in a blur. I was there, but not really. My mind was elsewhere, caught in a storm of betrayal and hurt. After they left, I found myself wandering through the house, lost in thought. Our home, once a haven of love and security, now felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse at any moment. I stumbled upon a photo album, pages filled with pictures of happier times. Mark and I laughing, holding each other. Was it all just a lie? Had I been living a dream while he lived a double life? That evening, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. I realized that I couldn't let this go. I needed to confront Mark, to hear the truth from his lips. Whatever that truth might be, I was ready to face it. I had to be. For my own sanity. And deep down, a part of me yearned for revenge. If Mark had shattered our vows, then he didn't deserve my silence. He didn't deserve the facade of a happy family that I had helped build. As the night deepened, so did my resolve. I would confront Mark, and if my fears were confirmed, he would pay for his betrayal. In what way, I wasn't sure yet, but he would pay. Monday arrived with a sense of foreboding. I had spent the weekend in turmoil, oscillating between denial and a desire for the truth. Today I decided I would confront Mark. As the clock ticked closer to the time Mark was due to arrive, my anxiety grew. My hands trembled as I prepared coffee, each spoonful of sugar sounding unnervingly loud in the silent kitchen. The doorbell rang, jolting me from my thoughts. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Mark stood there, his smile faltering slightly as he noticed my somber expression. "Emma, what's wrong?" he asked, stepping inside. I led him to the living room, my heart pounding. "We need to talk, Mark." He looked concerned now, his eyes searching mine. "Of course, anything." I took a deep breath, the words I had rehearsed all weekend spilling out. "Lucas called. He said something disturbing about you being unfaithful." Mark's reaction was immediate, his face flushed, his eyes darting away. "Lucas said what? That's ridiculous, Emma." But his denial lacked conviction, his voice betraying him. I pressed on, the hurt and anger giving me strength. "He saw you, Mark, with a younger woman. He's convinced you're having an affair." Mark's posture stiffened, his expression hardening. "Lucas is mistaken. I can't believe you'd think I'd do something like that." But the more he denied, the clearer the truth became. His body language, the evasion in his eyes, it all pointed to one painful reality. Mark was lying. "Are you really going to stand there and lie to me, Mark?" My voice trembled with emotion. "After all these years, you owe me the truth." For a moment he looked like he might confess, but then his face closed off, his voice cold. "I have nothing to confess, Emma. If you choose to believe Lucas over me, then that's your problem." His words felt like a slap in the face. The man I had loved, trusted, and supported was now a stranger, hiding behind a veil of lies and deceit. The conversation spiraled into an argument, accusations and denials flying. But no confession came. Mark maintained his innocence, even as his lies crumbled around him. Finally, exhausted and emotionally drained, I ended the confrontation. "I can't do this anymore, Mark. I don't know who you are." Mark left, his departure leaving a cold void in the house. I sat there alone, the weight of his betrayal crushing me. But amidst the pain, a fire was kindling within me. A fire fueled by betrayal and the desire for revenge. Mark had chosen to deceive and hurt me. Now, it was my turn to make him pay for his lies. I didn't know how yet, but I was determined. Mark would not get away with this. He would feel the consequences of his actions, just as I was feeling the pain of his betrayal. The days following my confrontation with Mark were a blur of emotions. Betrayal, anger, and disbelief swirled within me, a constant storm. But amidst the chaos, a new resolve was forming. I wouldn't be a victim. I would fight back. One morning, as I sat at the kitchen table going through our finances, the reality of my situation became starkly clear. Mark had always controlled the money, and now I was left with barely enough to cover the bills. The thought of asking him for more was intolerable. Determined, I decided to take control of my life. I started looking for a job, something I hadn't done since before Lucas was born. I scoured the classifieds, sent out resumes, and finally I got a call for an interview at a local retail store. The interview day arrived, and as I sat across from the store manager, Mr. Thompson, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. His questions were straightforward, and I answered them as best as I could, emphasizing my eagerness to learn and adapt. "You've been out of the workforce for a while," Mr. Thompson noted, his tone neutral. "Yes," I admitted, "but I'm ready to start again. I'm hardworking and quick to learn." Mr. Thompson nodded, his expression softening. "All right, Mrs. Thompson, we're willing to give you a chance." Gratitude flooded through me. This was more than a job. It was a step towards my independence. As I started working, I found a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt in years. Each day at the store was challenging, but it was also liberating. I was making my own money, no longer solely dependent on Mark. However, my newfound independence seemed to irk Mark. He started calling me, his tone oscillating between condescension and anger. "Why do you need to work?" he sneered during one call. "I provide for you, don't I? Or are you trying to make a point?" His words stung, but they also fueled my resolve. "I'm working because I want to be independent, Mark. I'm not your puppet anymore." There was a pause, and then he laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "Well, if you're so independent, maybe I should stop supporting you altogether. See how you like that." The threat was clear, but I refused to be intimidated. "Do what you must, Mark. I will survive, with or without your support." After that call, Mark cut the financial support he had been giving me. It was a blow, but not an unexpected one. I tightened my belt, budgeted rigorously, and focused on my job. As the days passed, my anger towards Mark turned into something else, a burning desire for revenge. He thought he could control me, break me. But he was wrong. I was stronger than he knew. I started to plan, to think of ways to expose him for what he was. A cheater, a liar, a manipulator. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the pain he had caused me, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. The opportunity for my revenge presented itself unexpectedly. Mark's parents, George and Helen, invited us for a family dinner, a tradition we had maintained for years. This time, however, the dinner was anything but ordinary for me. It was the stage where Mark's facade would crumble. I arrived early to help with preparations, my heart heavy yet determined. Helen noticed my subdued mood, but attributed it to stress. Little did she know the turmoil that churned within me. As we were setting the table, the doorbell rang. It was Mark, his usual confident self, unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. Following him was Lucas, my son, the bearer of the truth. Dinner commenced with light conversation, but the air was heavy with unspoken words. I glanced at Lucas, giving him a subtle nod. It was time. Lucas cleared his throat, commanding the attention of the table. "There's something I need to say, something about Dad." Mark laughed it off. "What is it, son? Another one of your pranks?" But Lucas's expression was grave. "No, Dad, this is serious. I saw you with another woman. Not just once, multiple times." The room went silent. Mark's face turned ashen, his confident demeanor faltering. "What are you talking about, Lucas?" "That's nonsense," Mark stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. Lucas's gaze was unwavering. "I saw you, Dad. You were with her at a hotel. She's young, about my age. You can't deny it." Helen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. George's face hardened, his eyes narrowing at Mark. "Is this true, Mark? Are you cheating on Emma?" Helen's voice was a whisper, laced with disbelief and pain. Mark's facade finally broke. He looked from face to face, realizing the gravity of the situation. "It's not what you think. She's just a colleague." But his weak defense fell on deaf ears. The damage was done. George stood up, his voice thundering. "You bring shame to this family. How could you do this to Emma, to your own son?" Mark tried to argue, to justify his actions, but his words were empty, hollow. The truth was laid bare for all to see. I watched, a mix of satisfaction and sorrow in my heart. Mark had been exposed. His betrayal, his lies, all out in the open. But the pain it caused his parents, the disappointment in Lucas's eyes, was a bitter pill to swallow. The dinner ended abruptly, the family shattered by the revelation. Mark left, his head hung low, his image as the perfect son, the perfect husband, destroyed. As I drove home that night, a part of me felt vindicated, but another part grieved for the loss of the family I once knew. Yet amidst the chaos, I knew one thing for certain. Mark would pay for his betrayal. This was just the beginning of his downfall. The fallout from the dinner was immediate and far-reaching. Mark's betrayal had not only fractured our family, but also stained his reputation. His parents, once his staunchest supporters, were now his fiercest critics. In the following weeks, I watched as Mark's life began to unravel. His affair, once hidden in the shadows, was now public knowledge, and the consequences were devastating. His work suffered, friends distanced themselves, and even our son, Lucas, struggled to come to terms with his father's actions. But amidst the chaos, a plan formed in my mind, a plan for retribution. Mark had taken so much from me, it was time he understood the pain he had inflicted. I began by reaching out to a lawyer, a friend from before I married Mark. I explained my situation, the years of emotional neglect, and Mark's recent infidelity. She was sympathetic and immediately offered to help. "We'll make sure you get what you deserve, Emma. It's time for Mark to face the consequences of his actions," she said with determination. Armed with legal support, I confronted Mark about a divorce. He was taken aback, his arrogance faltering under the weight of his crumbling world. "Emma, please, let's talk about this. I know I made a mistake, but I can change," he pleaded, a shadow of his former self. But I was resolute. "It's too late for that, Mark. You've made your choices, and now you must live with them." The divorce proceedings were messy, as Mark tried to cling to his rapidly diminishing assets. But my lawyer was relentless, and in the end, I was awarded a significant portion of our shared assets, including the house. As Mark's world crumbled, I began to rebuild mine. The divorce had granted me a substantial settlement, which I used to secure my financial independence. I continued working, finding solace and strength in my newfound autonomy. The final blow to Mark came unexpectedly. His affair with the younger woman, now his only solace, ended abruptly. She left him, unable to cope with the public scrutiny and the reality of being with a man whose life was in ruins. Mark was left alone, a shadow of the man he once was. His career, his reputation, his personal life, all had fallen apart because of his choices. As for me, I found peace in my independence. I reconnected with old friends, explored new hobbies, and even began dating again, something I hadn't thought possible. The path to healing was long and fraught with challenges, but I emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Mark's betrayal had broken me, but in the end, it had also freed me. I had faced my deepest fears and come out victorious. And though I took no pleasure in Mark's downfall, there was a sense of justice in seeing him face the consequences of his actions. He had chosen his path, and now he had to walk it alone. As I looked to the future, I knew that new horizons awaited me, horizons filled with hope, strength, and the promise of a life lived on my terms. The sound of shattering glass jolted me from my daydream. I stared at the broken vase on the marble floor, water and lilies scattered around my feet. My hands trembled as I bent to clean up the mess, my mind racing with the conversation I'd overheard just moments ago. "Rodney, darling," I'd cooed into the phone earlier. "I was thinking we could have a nice dinner tonight. I'll make your favorite." "Not tonight, Jenna." He'd cut me off. His voice clipped. "I've got a late meeting. Don't wait up." I'd frowned, about to protest when I heard a woman's muffled laughter in the background. My blood ran cold as Rodney quickly ended the call. Now, as I swept up the broken pieces of porcelain, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling in my gut. After giving up my high-powered career to be the perfect wife Rodney wanted, was this how he repaid me? The doorbell rang, startling me from my spiraling thoughts. I wiped my hands on my apron and hurried to answer it. "Mom?" I blinked in surprise at the sight of my mother, Amelia, standing on the porch. She raised an eyebrow. "Well, aren't you going to invite me in?" I stepped aside, allowing her to sweep past me into the foyer. Her sharp eyes took in the shattered vase and my disheveled appearance. "What's wrong, Jenna?" she asked, her tone softening. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I hesitated, unsure how to voice my suspicions. It's Rodney," I finally managed. "I think he might be—" The words caught in my throat, but Mom's eyes narrowed in understanding. "Cheating?" she finished for me. I nodded, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Mom's lips thinned into a hard line. "That bastard," she muttered. "I never liked him, you know. Always thought he was too slick for his own good." "Mom," I protested weakly, "we don't know for sure." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "A woman knows these things, Jenna. You're not stupid. What did you hear?" I recounted the phone call, my suspicions growing with each word. Mom listened intently, her expression darkening. "Well," she said when I finished, "there's only one thing to do now." "What's that?" I asked, dreading her answer. "We catch him red-handed," she declared, a glint of determination in her eye. "No son-in-law of mine is going to make a fool of my daughter." I felt a flicker of hope at her words. "But how?" Mom's smile was positively wicked. "Leave that to me, dear. I didn't spend 40 years married to your father without learning a thing or two about men and their indiscretions." Just then my phone buzzed with a text from Rodney. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." I showed it to Mom, my heart sinking. She read it quickly, then looked up at me with fire in her eyes. "Perfect," she said. "We start tonight." As we began to plot, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. Was I really ready to uncover the truth about my marriage? And if Rodney was cheating, what would I do? The sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted our scheming. Mom and I exchanged a panicked look. "Rodney's home early," I whispered. Mom squeezed my hand. "Remember, act natural. We'll figure this out together." As the key turned in the lock, I took a deep breath and plastered on a smile. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. My life was about to change forever. I drummed my fingers on the steering wheel. My nerves frayed as I pulled into the parking lot of Hawkeye Investigations. The neon sign flickered ominously in the twilight, matching the churning in my stomach. "You're doing the right thing, Jenna," I muttered to myself, gathering the courage to step out of the car. The bell above the door jingled as I entered the dingy office. A grizzled man with a 5 o'clock shadow looked up from his desk, eyeing me warily. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I swallowed hard. I need to hire a private investigator." He gestured to the chair across from him. As I sat, he introduced himself as Frank Hawkins. "So what seems to be the problem?" he asked, leaning back in his creaky chair. I took a deep breath. "I think my husband is cheating on me." Frank's expression didn't change as he pulled out a notepad. "Tell me everything." As I recounted the suspicious phone calls, late nights at the office, and the woman's laughter I'd overheard, Frank jotted down notes. When I finished, he looked up at me with a grim expression. "I'll take the case, Mrs. Lane, but I have to warn you, you might not like what I find." I nodded, my throat tight. I need to know the truth. After discussing rates and logistics, I left the office feeling both relieved and terrified. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Rodney. "Great news. Found the perfect house. Can't wait to show you tomorrow." My heart sank. How could he be planning our future while potentially destroying our marriage? The next day, Rodney practically bounced with excitement as we pulled up to a charming 2-story home in an up-and-coming neighborhood. "What do you think?" he asked, grinning like a schoolboy. I forced a smile. "It's lovely, dear." As we toured the house, Rodney rattled off its features: gleaming hardwood floors, a gourmet kitchen, a spacious master suite. But all I could think about was whether he planned to bring his mistress here. "We could start a family in this house," Rodney said softly, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I stiffened, guilt and anger warring inside me. "About that," I began, turning to face him, "I think we should see a fertility specialist before we make any big decisions." Rodney's brow furrowed. "Why? We're both young and healthy." It's been a while, and nothing's happened," I explained, hating the lie but needing answers. "I want to make sure everything's okay." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, if it'll make you feel better." As we left the house, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Frank. "Got some preliminary info. Meet tomorrow?" My stomach clenched. "Everything okay?" Rodney asked, noticing my expression. I plastered on a smile. "Just Mom checking in. So about this house." We spent the drive home discussing finances, with Rodney assuring me we could afford it with the savings I'd been squirreling away. Little did he know, those savings might soon become my lifeline. That night, as Rodney slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing. What would Frank's investigation reveal? And if Rodney was cheating, could I really go through with buying this house, knowing our marriage was built on lies? Just before dawn, I made a decision. I'd go through with the house purchase. It was a solid investment, affair or no affair. But I'd also start preparing for the worst. As the first rays of sunlight peeked through the curtains, I slipped out of bed and headed to the home office. It was time to dust off my old resume and see what opportunities might be out there for an ex-corporate powerhouse turned housewife. Whatever happened next, I'd be ready. Rodney Lane might think he held all the cards, but he was about to learn that his perfect little housewife had a few tricks up her sleeve. The sterile smell of the fertility clinic made my stomach churn as Rodney and I sat in uncomfortable silence, waiting for Dr. Patel to return with our test results. I glanced at Rodney, noticing the sheen of sweat on his forehead. Was it nerves about the results or guilt over his suspected affair? "Mr. and Mrs. Lane?" Dr. Patel's voice startled us both. She entered, a somber expression on her face. My heart plummeted. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news," she began, her voice gentle. "Based on our tests, it appears that conceiving naturally will be extremely challenging for you." I felt the air leave my lungs. Despite my suspicions about Rodney, a part of me had still dreamed of having a family with him. "What's the issue?" Rodney asked, his voice strained. Dr. Patel hesitated, then looked directly at Rodney. "The problem lies with you, Mr. Lane. Your sperm count is extremely low and motility is poor. It's highly unlikely you'll be able to father children without significant medical intervention." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Rodney's face crumple, a mix of shock and devastation etched into every line. For a moment, I forgot about my anger and suspicion, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "There are options," Dr. Rao Patel continued, outlining various fertility treatments and their success rates. But I barely heard her. My mind was racing. If Rodney couldn't father children, then how? "We'll need some time to process this," I heard myself say, standing abruptly. "Thank you, doctor." The drive home was tense, Rodney gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. When we finally pulled into our driveway, he turned to me, his eyes red-rimmed. "Jenna, I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I know how much you wanted children." I swallowed hard, torn between comforting him and confronting him. "It's not your fault, Rodney. These things happen." He nodded, then surprised me by pulling me into a fierce hug. "I love you," he murmured into my hair. "We'll get through this together." For a moment, I let myself believe him, but as we entered the house, reality came crashing back. The private investigator's preliminary report, the suspicious phone calls, the late nights at the office, it all pointed to an affair. And now, with this new information, "I need some air," I mumbled, heading for the back porch. Once outside, I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed my mother. "Mom?" I whispered when she answered. "I need you." An hour later, I sat at my mother's kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold in front of me, as I recounted everything. The fertility clinic results, my suspicions about Rodney's affair, and the gnawing fear that had taken root in my gut. "Oh, sweetheart," Mom sighed, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm so sorry you're going through this." "What do I do, Mom?" I asked, feeling lost. "If Rodney can't have children and he's having an affair—" Mom's eyes narrowed. "You think this other woman might be pregnant?" The possibility hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I nodded, unable to voice the fear aloud. "Listen to me, Jenna," Mom said, her voice firm. "You need to get all the facts before you do anything rash. Wait for the full report from the investigator. And in the meantime, keep your eyes and ears open." I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. "You're right. I need to be smart about this." As I drove home that evening, my mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. I'd play the role of the supportive wife, comforting Rodney through this fertility crisis. But behind the scenes, I'd be gathering evidence, preparing for whatever bombshell might be coming my way. Pulling into the driveway, I noticed Rodney's car was gone. A text message blinked on my phone. "Working late, don't wait up." I smiled grimly. Game on, Rodney. Game on. The manila envelope sat on my kitchen table like a ticking time bomb. Frank Hawkins had called earlier, his gruff voice tinged with sympathy. "Got the full report, Mrs. Lane. It's, well, you should see for yourself." My hands trembled as I reached for the envelope. Taking a deep breath, I pulled out the contents, a stack of photos and a detailed written report. My heart pounded as I flipped through the images. Rodney, arm around a young blonde woman outside a cozy Italian restaurant. Rodney and the same woman kissing passionately in a park. Rodney helping her into his car, his hand lingering on her lower back. I felt bile rise in my throat as I scanned the report. The woman's name was Carla Thompson, 28 years old, a junior executive at Rodney's company. They'd been meeting regularly for months, often during late nights at the office or business trips. The world spun around me as the full weight of Rodney's betrayal crashed down. I stumbled to the bathroom, barely making it before I emptied the contents of my stomach. As I rinsed my mouth, I caught sight of my reflection. Pale, shaken, eyes brimming with unshed tears. "No," I said firmly to my reflection. "You will not break for him." I marched back to the kitchen, snatching up my phone to call Mom. She answered on the first ring. "It's true," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The investigator confirmed everything. Mom's sharp intake of breath crackled through the line. "Oh, Jenna, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. What are you going to do?" I paused, considering. "I'm going to divorce him, Mom, but first, I need to be smart about this." We talked strategy for the next hour. By the time we hung up, I had a plan forming. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Rodney. "Heading out for a business trip. Back in 3 days. Love you?" I snorted. Business trip, indeed. More like a romantic getaway with his mistress. But this time, his lie was exactly what I needed. Over the next 3 days, I was a whirlwind of activity. I contacted a divorce lawyer, gathering all our financial documents. I reached out to old colleagues, subtly putting out feelers for job opportunities, and I started packing, carefully selecting the items that meant the most to me. On the third day, as I was sorting through some old photos, I came across our wedding album. Tears pricked my eyes as I flipped through the pages, remembering the hope and love I'd felt that day. How could Rodney throw all of this away? The sound of a car in the driveway jolted me from my reverie. Rodney was home early. Panic surged through me as I scrambled to hide the evidence of my plans. "Jenna?" Rodney called as he entered the house. "I'm home." I plastered on a smile and went to greet him. "Welcome back, honey. How was your trip?" Rodney's eyes darted away guiltily. "Oh, you know, same old boring meetings." As he rambled on about fictitious client dinners, I studied him. The man I'd loved, the man I'd given up my career for, he was a stranger to me now. "Actually, Rodney," I interrupted, my heart pounding. "We need to talk." He frowned, noticing my serious tone. "What's wrong?" A deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. "I know about Carla," I said quietly. Rodney's face drained of color. "Jenna, I can explain," but I held up a hand, silencing him. "Save it. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with finality. As I watched shock and panic flicker across Rodney's face, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The worst had happened, and I was still standing. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it head on. My hands shook as I smoothed down my blazer, staring at my reflection in the mirror. It had been years since I'd worn anything but comfortable housewife attire. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, determined, fierce, ready to reclaim her life. "You've got this, Jenna," I whispered to myself, grabbing my portfolio and heading out the door. The small accounting firm, Greenwood & Associates, was a far cry from my former corporate glory days. But it was a start. As I sat in the waiting room, my mind raced with a mixture of excitement and terror. Could I really do this? Jump back into the workforce after years of being a housewife? "Mrs. Lane?" A kind-faced woman appeared. "Mr. Greenwood will see you now." The interview was a blur of questions about my past experience, my skills, and the gap in my resume. I explained my situation as diplomatically as possible, leaving out the sordid details of Rodney's betrayal. "Well, Mrs. Lane," Mr. Greenwood said, leaning back in his chair, "your experience is impressive, but I'll be honest. That gap in your employment is concerning." My heart sank, but I refused to give up. "Mr. Greenwood, I understand your concern, but I can assure you my skills haven't diminished. In fact, managing a household budget and investments has only sharpened my financial acumen. Give me a chance, and I'll prove my worth." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, Mrs. Lane, we'll start you on a probationary period. Welcome to the team." Relief and joy washed over me as I shook his hand. "Thank you, sir. You won't regret this." As I left the office, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Rodney. "Where are you? We need to talk about the divorce." Reality came crashing back. I had a job now, but I was still married to a cheater, still living in our shared home. It was time to make my final move. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with plans. When I arrived, Rodney was waiting, his face a mask of false contrition. "Jenna, please," he began. "Can't we work this out? I made a mistake, but I love you." I held up a hand, silencing him. "Save it, Rodney. I'm done listening to your lies." His expression hardened. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it, we'll let the lawyers handle everything. But don't expect to get much in the settlement. You haven't worked in years, remember?" A small, satisfied smile played at my lips. "Actually, Rodney, I just got a job. And as for the settlement, I think you'll find I'm entitled to quite a bit." The color drained from his face. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the savings I've been managing, the investments I've made. Oh, and let's not forget about our new house. I think I'll be keeping that." Rodney sputtered, his composure cracking. "You can't do this." "Watch me," I said, my voice steel. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some packing to do." I brushed past him, heading upstairs to our bedroom. As I pulled out my suitcases, a strange mix of emotions washed over me. Grief for the life I was leaving behind, excitement for the future ahead, and a burning desire for justice. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. "How did it go, sweetheart?" I took a deep breath, looking around the room that had been my prison for so long. "It's done, Mom. I got the job and I'm leaving Rodney tonight." There was a pause, then Mom's voice came through, filled with pride and determination. "That's my girl. I'm on my way to help you pack. It's time to start your new life, Jenna." As I hung up, I caught sight of myself in the mirror again. This time, I recognized the woman staring back at me. Strong, resilient, ready to face whatever came next. Let Rodney have his affair. I had a whole new life waiting for me, and I was ready to seize it with both hands. The front door slammed open, jolting me from my packing. Rodney's voice boomed through the house. "Jenna, where are you?" I froze, my heart pounding. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was meant to be gone before he returned from his business trip. Steeling myself, I descended the stairs. The sight that greeted me in the living room knocked the wind out of me. Rodney stood there, his arm wrapped possessively around a young blonde woman. Carla, I presumed. Her hand rested on a slightly swollen belly. "Well, well," Rodney sneered. "Looks like the little housewife is trying to run away." I straightened my spine, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm not running, Rodney. I'm leaving. There's a difference." Carla giggled, the sound grating on my nerves. "Oh, honey," she cooed. "Did you really think you could just walk away after everything Rodney's done for you?" Rage bubbled up inside me. "Everything he's done for me? You mean like cheating on me? Lying to me? Making me give up my career?" Rodney's face darkened. "That's enough, Jenna. We're here to settle this like adults. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, even though I'd been expecting them. "Fine," I said. my voice steadier than I felt. Let's talk terms. Rodney's lips curled into a smug smile. It's simple. You'll get a modest alimony. After all, I've been the breadwinner all these years. You should be grateful for anything you get. I bit back a laugh. If only he knew. Oh, and one more thing, Carla chimed in, her hand caressing her belly. We'll be needing the house. For the baby, you understand. The room spun around me. A baby. The one thing Rodney and I could never have. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. You can't be serious, I whispered. Rodney shrugged. It is what it is, Jenna. Carla and I are starting a family. You had your chance. Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration, anger, and hurt came pouring out. My chance? You mean in the years I spent supporting you, managing our home, investing our money? The career I gave up because you insisted on having a traditional wife? And now you waltz in here with your pregnant mistress and expect me to just roll over? Rodney's face flushed with anger. Watch it, Jenna. Remember who holds the purse strings here. I laughed then, a sharp, bitter sound. Oh, Rodney, you have no idea, do you? Confusion flickered across his face. What are you talking about? I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. I'm talking about the fact that I've been managing our finances for years. Those investments you never bothered to look at, they've tripled in value. That little savings account, it's not so little anymore. Rodney's jaw dropped. Carla looked between us, her smug expression faltering. And as for the house, I continued, I think you'll find that I'm entitled to half of everything, including that. So no, you won't be moving your little mistress in here. You're bluffing, Rodney sputtered. I smiled, feeling a surge of power. Am I? Why don't we let the lawyers sort it out? I'm sure they'll be very interested in how you've been misappropriating company funds to finance your affair. The color drained from Rodney's face. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I said, my voice steel. For a moment we stood there, the air crackling with tension. Then Rodney grabbed Carla's arm. We're leaving. This isn't over, Jenna. As the door slammed behind them, I sank onto the couch, my legs shaking. I'd done it. I'd stood up to Rodney, to Carla, to the life that had been suffocating me for years. But as the adrenaline faded, fear crept in. Rodney wouldn't go down without a fight. And now, with the baby on the way, the stakes were higher than ever. I reached for my phone, dialing my mother's number. Mom, I said when she answered, my voice breaking. I need your help. It's time to finish this. The conference room felt suffocating as I sat across from Rodney and his shark of a lawyer. My own attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Gloria, sat beside me, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm. Let's get this over with, Rodney growled, his eyes never meeting mine. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the battle ahead. Fine. Let's talk about the house first. Rodney's lawyer leaned forward, a predatory gleam in his eye. Mr. Lane is willing to be generous. He'll allow you to stay in the house for 6 months. Get back on your feet. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound brittle and harsh. Get back on my feet. That's rich coming from you, Rodney. Tell me, how's Carla enjoying my home? Rodney's face flushed red. Leave her out of this. Gentlemen, Gloria interjected smoothly. Let's focus on the facts. The house was purchased with joint funds, and Mrs. Lane has been managing the household finances. She's entitled to her fair share. Rodney's lawyer scoffed. Fair share? She hasn't worked in years. What could she possibly contribute? I felt a surge of anger, but Gloria's hand on my arm kept me grounded. Actually, she said, sliding a folder across the table, Mrs. Lane has been quite busy. These are records of all the investments and savings she's managed over the years. The room fell silent as Rodney and his lawyer pored over the documents. I watched Rodney's face pale as he realized just how much I'd been doing behind the scenes. This can't be right, he stammered. Oh, it's right, I said, my voice steady. And there's more. I want the house, Rodney. Not just for 6 months. For good. His head snapped up, eyes blazing. You can't be serious. What about Carla? The baby? The mention of their child sent a sharp pain through my heart. But I pushed it aside. Your infidelity and your new family are not my concern. I've spent years investing in our future, and I'm not walking away with nothing. Rodney's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Rodney waved him off. He spat. Take the damn house, but don't think you're getting anything else. I exchanged a glance with Gloria, who nodded encouragingly. Actually, Rodney, there's one more thing. I want half of everything, including your company stocks. The color drained from Rodney's face. You can't touch those. They're in my name. Gloria cleared her throat. Actually, Mr. Lane, given the length of your marriage and Mrs. Lane's contributions to the household, she's entitled to an equitable distribution of all marital assets, including your stocks. Rodney leapt to his feet, his chair clattering to the floor. This is insane. I won't let you ruin me. I stood slowly, meeting his gaze. Ruin you? Like you ruined our marriage? Our future? Face it, Rodney. You underestimated me, and now you're paying the price. For a moment, I thought he might lunge across the table at me, but then something in his eyes changed. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a cold, calculating look that sent chills down my spine. You want to play hardball, Jenna? Fine, but remember, I know things about you, too. Things that could make your life very difficult. My heart raced, but I refused to show fear. Is that a threat, Rodney? He smiled, a cruel twist of his lips. Let's call it a promise. You push me too far, and I'll make sure you regret it. As Rodney stormed out of the room, his lawyer scrambling to follow, I sank back into my chair, suddenly exhausted. Gloria squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. You did well, Jenna. But this isn't over yet. Are you ready for what comes next? I closed my eyes, thinking of everything I'd been through, everything still to come. When I opened them again, I felt a new resolve stealing my spine. I'm ready, I said. Whatever Rodney throws at me, I can handle it. It's time to finish this, once and for all. The doorbell rang, its chime echoing through the empty house. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my blazer before opening the door. Rodney stood there, a shadow of the man I once loved, his face haggard and eyes bloodshot. Come to beg for the house back? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He pushed past me, stumbling into the foyer. You ruined me, Jenna. Are you happy now? I closed the door, turning to face him. Ruined you? What are you talking about? Rodney laughed bitterly. Don't play dumb. The company demoted me, sent me to some backwater regional office, all because of your little stunt with the divorce proceedings. A pang of guilt hit me, but I pushed it aside. I didn't do anything except stand up for myself, Rodney. Your choices led you here. He whirled on me, eyes blazing. My choices? What about yours? You were supposed to be a wife, not some corporate shark. The old Jenna might have flinched at his words, but not anymore. I was both, Rodney. I managed our home and our finances. I made smart investments while you were busy with your affair. Don't blame me for your failings. Rodney's face crumpled. How did you do it? How did you outsmart me? I sighed, suddenly feeling very tired. It wasn't about outsmarting you, Rodney. I just paid attention. I learned. I planned for our future while you planned for a different future, didn't you? He sank onto the stairs, head in his hands. What am I supposed to do now? Carla left me. The baby. It wasn't even mine. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. All this pain, all this betrayal, for a lie. I'm sorry, Rodney, but that's not my problem anymore. He looked up at me, eyes pleading. Can't we start over? I made a mistake, but we had something good once, didn't we? For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd married, but then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, the years of putting my dreams on hold. No, Rodney, we can't go back. It's time for both of us to move forward. I reached into my pocket, pulling out an envelope. Here, this is the profit from selling the house. Half of it is yours, as we agreed. Rodney stared at the envelope, then back at me. You sold the house? But I never wanted the house, Rodney. I wanted what it represented, our future, but that future is gone now. It's time for a new one. He took the envelope with trembling hands. What will you do now? I smiled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I'm going to live, Rodney. I've got a new job, new goals. I'm going to be the woman I always wanted to be, not just someone's wife. Rodney stood slowly, looking around the empty house one last time. I really messed up, didn't I? We both did, I said softly. But it's not too late to start over, for either of us. As I watched Rodney walk out of the house, out of my life, for the last time I felt a mix of sadness and exhilaration. The past few months had been a whirlwind of pain, anger, and revelation. But standing there in the empty foyer of the house we once shared, I realized something profound. I was free. Free from the lies, the expectations, the stifling role I'd forced myself into. Free to be Jenna Lane, not just Mrs. Rodney Lane. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. All packed and ready? You sure about this? I smiled, typing back a quick response. Absolutely. Time for a new adventure. As I locked the door behind me, I took one last look at the house. It had been the stage for so much drama, so much heartache. But it had also been the crucible that forged me into the woman I was now, stronger, wiser, and ready to take on the world. I climbed into my packed car, the open road stretching out before me. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, that uncertainty felt thrilling rather than terrifying. Goodbye, Rodney, I whispered, putting the car in drive. Hello, life. As I pulled away from the curb, I felt a surge of excitement. The road ahead might be bumpy, but I was ready for whatever came next. After all, I was Jenna Lane, survivor, fighter, and architect of my own destiny, and my story was just beginning.